Have I told you about Blazing Cadence yet?
Blazing Cadence could be the best game ever. You have told me about it. And it's built off of this. So if you just want to pivot to that, I understand how we got there. Mark has spent the last 2 weeks thinking about this Blazing Cadence game where he plays a musical note onto a staff. Is that what they're called? Like a wizard staff?
Yes.
Onto a musical staff. And you're creating this song throughout the game. And at the end of the game, it's all color-coded and you get to play the song, even if you can't play the piano. It's amazing. I don't know why we're not doing that. That or Tender Mercenaries. What are we doing with our...
Whatever happened to Tender Mercenaries?
I'm Hunter Pence, and you're listening to the Misplay podcast. Oh, yeah.
Hello, and welcome to the Misplay, where we don't look at the enabled expansions on Board Game Arena. My name is Mark.
My name is Jason.
There's got to be a story there.
More than once, I have clicked, and it usually happens with Seven Wonders Duel. I'll click the Play Seven Wonders Duel on Board Game Arena. The players join, I click Start, and then when I get into the game, I look at the board and I go, what game is this? And then I realize I had an expansion enabled. And I only play Seven Wonders Duel on Board Game Arena, just like the base. I've never played any of the other expansions.
Do you own any of the expansions?
No. So I don't want to disconnect. So I've had to play Seven Wonders Duel with the expansions, and I have no idea what these bonus effects are doing with the Pantheon, and I've lost all of those games.
Those are games that you set up, and so you just didn't disable them?
I actually still don't know how it's happening. Sometimes when I click Seven Wonders Duel, I am somehow enabling an expansion, or maybe my opponent is, and they're just matching me. If you just say you're willing to play this game, it matches you with somebody who's willing to play an expansion. There's a screen, I've looked closely now, there's a screen that says whether or not an expansion is enabled. I just have to look closely at that, and then I can be like, nope, don't want to play with the expansion.
Better luck next time.
Yeah. I'm a little sad today. KublaCon is this weekend. One of our goals was to have a playtestable version of our game, sit down in the Protospiel area, and have people playtest. I'm a little bummed we're not able to do that.
It is a bummer that Animal Kingdom did not make it to a form that we could take to KublaCon. But there's some good reasons why that didn't happen.
Go on.
A lot of what we've talked about on the show recently. We've talked about our design rut, we're stuck, we're trying to unstuck ourselves, we're exploring how to unstuck ourselves, and you've blasted us off into outer space with another twist and turn in the road.
We've gone off the roads.
We blasted off into outer space.
I can't wait to tell this story in a few minutes because I don't know if you're even thinking about Whimsy Val, but that's a huge piece of this story. And it's a game nobody ever played.
We talked about it.
We talked about it. We never played it. I never got it to a point where we were playtesting it.
Sure.
But looking at it and talking about it led to the direction that we're going now.
And the direction we're going now is really exciting.
You used the word.
I think I sounded more exciting than I usually do. I think what we're going to talk about today has captured my imagination in a way that other games we have discussed have not captured my imagination.
And I want to emphasize, it's all based on Animal Kingdom, or based on the work that we did with Animal Kingdom.
That caveat saves you, and I don't believe that's true.
Yeah, you were pressing some imaginary button. But before we talk about the game, today's episode is sponsored by Koenig Creations. Koenig Creations is a print and play design studio that seeks to make accessible, fun games that are easy to print. Their games include Vault, a solitaire dice game, and Flip Freighters, a competitive flip and fill game. Both games have been adapted for Board Game Arena and are available to play for free. Their newest game, Elevator Operator, has players channeling their inner AI as they seek to get customers up and down to the preferred hotel floor. If you'd like to know more about Koenig Creations, visit their website at koenigcreations.com KOENIG-KREATIONS. Koenig Creations, easy to print, easy to play. Be careful that you don't select the expansions when you're playing their games on Board Game Arena.
Where are we?
See, whoever gets to say the bumper doesn't have to answer the question. So we're always competing to say, where are we? Because the next person has to talk. I can't say, where are we? And then answer the question.
I think you should let me say, where are we? Because I think for today, we should put you in game designer chair and we'll put me in interviewer chair.
I think that makes the most sense. Where are we?
Got me. Before we sat down to do our pre-show work together, I was coming into this show thinking we had talked about previously how we need to spend some time talking about what it would mean to simplify Animal Kingdom. And I remember on the show, you were like, oh, simplify. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean like a 4-year-old can play it? And it is a wider question than how accessible the rules are. So I came today to be like, oh, well, let's talk about what are the different metrics that create complexity in games and what have we thought of or what are we doing in terms of the game we're working on to simplify under the conditions that we mean by simplify. And then you hit me with this new game that we've tested a bunch and it has now captured my imagination. You said you drew a lot of inspiration from what we have done in Animal Kingdom for what we're going to talk about today. Do you want to tell us its name? Do you want to get into how did you simplify Animal Kingdom into this radically different game?
When we finished those last couple of episodes where we have talked about being stuck a little bit and we need to simplify, and we went back to the team and we talked about like restructuring Wednesday meetings even to try to create more opportunities and space for game design and allowing, somebody like Peter to continue to work on and have other projects going in the background, which are happening. I got this game into my head called Whimsy Val. And I named it because I had to submit the forms for the first exposure playtest hall. I needed to submit a game name, and you can always change it later. But I had to submit a game name. And I was working really hard to simplify Animal Kingdom down to a platform. You're building this platform. That was the whole idea behind the simplification was, okay, I'm running for Lord of the Realm, whatever it is. I think in the Whimsy Val, I was calling it Stewart, the Stewart of the Val. And you were going to put a platform out in front of you that you wanted to be known for. Like I wanted people to know that I was about community and I was about, making eco-friendly changes to the habitat. And I had this really funny moment where I built 3/4 of the game and then I realized I was playing Splendor. Do you remember those messages? I sent you messages. I'm like, I built this amazing game. It's called Splendor. And I had trouble getting it to exactly what I wanted it to be. And I brought it to one of the meetings and you saw me like walking through a little loop of the game and what a turn would look like. And then you sent me a text and you said, do you remember what you said to me?
Was it where I pitched the game as blanket statements instead?
Yeah. Where instead of having a lot of text on the pledges that were being played out on your platform, you pitched this idea where it was just one word and that you were creating these statements that then made your platform based on these words. And then you could have fun saying some of the words. What were some of the words you were saying?
So more specifically in my head, I was thinking in terms of building your platform, I wanted to get away from kind of the seriousness of elections and go into something where your board became these increasingly wild statements about what you believed in. So you could believe in polyphonic, monotone, aharmonic, abundant feast. And it would just get increasingly kind of silly, but still had this air of
Whimsy Val
or political language on some level.
And I was then building off of that idea a little bit. And then something else hit me. I still believe it's all connected.
I don't believe that's true.
I don't think we get to where we're at without everything else. I don't think we have the idea that I have right now, because actually it was from a conversation a long time ago with I'm So Bad, where I said to I'm So Bad, I don't feel like people love like the skin of this game where it's animals and politics. If I could reskin it, what could we do? What could we talk about? And I think one of those was like a wizard. You're trying to compete in different magic schools, the arcane magic versus the fire magic. But one of the things that I threw out there a long time ago was this idea of a dying world. So as much as you keep giving me eyes and saying they're not connected, I do really believe that the game that we're going to talk about today in a minute is Animal Kingdom, just without animals or the kingdom.
I don't want to nitpick at the details of how you got to this idea, because I do think there is a path where the work that we've done up to now has informed what you've created for us to talk about today. But now, having played Dying World, is that what you're calling it?
Temporarily,
Dying World is so radically different from the way that Animal Kingdom has played in any of its incarnations that it's hard for me to be like, yes, Animal Kingdom and Dying World, those two things really go together.
I will agree with that.
Before we go into how the game plays and some of the early testing, give us the synopsis of the game.
Some of the original thoughts for the game come from the book series, The Three-Body Problem. There is this idea that if you live in a dark forest in the universe, you don't want to make your location known to other civilizations. And if they do know where you are and they are advanced, they're probably just going to kill you. They're probably just going to blow you up. And the idea here is that your world is dying, and it is dying quickly, that your civilization is no longer going to exist, and you want to be able to preserve the information from your culture. So the idea is that people are competing to save what they think is important to them, whether that is knowledge, science and tech, or culture, stories and songs, or I have this idea of memory, that personal story, those individuals, maybe like incomplete, fragmented things. And so you're trying to get that information into, maybe it's a probe, some central location, so that it can be saved and preserved, because this world is dying. I hate that there's like some sort of point system around that and somebody has to win that. We'll talk more about that later and how that's changing. But that is the general idea of the game, is that you are trying to preserve the information from this civilization that existed.
There's a lot there, but it's a breath of fresh air, because I'll concede one of my big sticking points of really loving Animal Kingdom was the electoral theme. Dying World Apocalypse, much more up my alley.
So much less apocalyptic.
So much of a better story to tell.
Way more uplifting.
I think it can be.
I wish that wasn't true. But it's funny that, we've known that creating some sort of political game, there's going to be a certain subset of people who go, politics, I want nothing to do with it. World dying? Yeah, count me in.
Okay, so now we have our beautiful theme, our beautifully dark theme.
Yeah.
You've said that there is, in your mind, continuity between what we've done with Animal Kingdom and where Dying World comes from. What are the elements that you brought with you from Animal Kingdom?
The main thing that pulled me over was continuing to develop the platform. So in Whimsy Valley, you were playing cards in front of you, and that's who you were going to be in the game. And if those cards matched the endorsement that, the owl was looking for, if you played a community card and then you played an environment card, and that's what the owl wanted, the owl would come to you and you would bank them in Whimsy Val. The idea in Dying World is you're playing these fragments in front of you, your platform, and if you match, then you pull the relic to you, and you get to put the relic into the, the probe, the chest, the whatever it ends up being. So creating the platform is the thing that connects the two ideas?
Paint me more of the picture. I'm on board. I love the idea of assembling the knowledge that is going to persist into the capsule that you're going to launch off and retell where your location is for them to come get you after you send off your dying breath. But paint the picture for me now. So I open my box of Dying World. What am I going to take out? What am I going to put out? And how does the game play?
I hear that question, and I can imagine somebody hearing this podcast in a year from now and going, "What's he talking about? None of those things are in the game." So we are talking about where we're at right now. You would open up the box. Inside the box, there would be some sort of board that is your central play area. Currently, I just have it set up as like a grid. Maybe it's a different shape in the future. So you pull the board out, and then you have two piles of cards. One pile is fragments. There are three different colors. There's yellow for culture, green for knowledge, and violet for memory. And then there is a stack of relics. The fragments are the things that you're going to be drawing and playing in front of you in your platform area to match to the relics. And the relics are also have the same colors. So the relics are yellow, green, and violet as well. But on them are the specific kind of like the mastermind match you have to make. And then when you match them to the fragments in front of you, you get to pull it and put it to the community area. And then from there, you score points based on the number of points on the relics and then the number of points that you're forming within the grid based on some bonus combinations. And if you go to Blue Sky right now, you can see a picture from one of our playtests that kind of gives you like a really good picture of what I'm talking about. I think when you see it, it'll be like, oh, that's what he means.
A screenshot, if you will.
A screenshot, yeah, that's what they do.
So I just got to play it for the first time and was really charmed. I really enjoyed the simplicity of the turn. I really enjoyed competing for shared space on the board. The layout is very logical. And for the first time that we've been working on something this season, I feel like I have these flashing moments of, oh, this would be a beautiful way for this type of card to look. And that aspect of the game capturing my imagination, I think, is very compelling to me. Take me through the playtests. I wasn't able to join for the playtests.
The first playtest was a little different than what I just described. In our first playtest, we had individual boards. You were building on a 3x3 grid, and you were putting your own relics in whatever configuration you wanted, and intentionally didn't have any interaction, as I was just working on proof of concept and trying to figure out if the turns in the loop made sense. And we actually found that they didn't. What was happening was you were drawing a fragment on your turn, and then you were playing a fragment. And then when you matched one of the relics, you pulled it to your 3x3 grid, and then the fragments went away. And you were constantly restarting your board. And it wasn't, it's one of those things that like you have to be playing the game to understand it. Because in my head, I'm like, that made perfect sense. But when I started playing it, I didn't like it because it felt like, oh, I just spent all that time building that this is who I wanted to be. I was the knowledge person, and I had 3 knowledge cards out, and now I just lost them, and I got to start over again. And now I'm not going to be the knowledge person, I'm going to be the memory person. And so you were always changing who you were going to be, and I didn't love that idea. So first playtest, we played through it. It was about a 45-minute playtest. We got to an end game. We counted points. It worked. It functioned. You know, you played a fragment. When you matched, you grabbed a relic, and you repeated. And there was not a lot of interaction. Every time you got to play a fragment, you did have like a unique ability you could do. So if you played a yellow culture one, you got to draw another fragment. If you played green, you got to dig through the relics. If you played the violet card, the memory card, you got to rearrange the fragments in front of you. You got to move one of them. And in fact, I think that was the thing everybody was like, oh, that's the coolest feeling. That feels good. When you play the violet card, the memory card, you get to move a card in your platform in front of you, your active play area, and rearrange and make a different combination. That's one of the key elements of the game right now. For the second playtest, I made a few changes. I took out drawing a fragment every turn because one of the weird things at the end of our game, we ended our game, we each had like 12 or 13 fragments in our hand that we just couldn't use. So I wanted to make acquiring fragments a little bit more challenging. So you didn't draw one every turn. And the biggest change to the game was instead of removing the fragments after you matched a relic, they would stay in front of you. So if you put the 3 green knowledge cards out and you pulled the green relic that was matched by the 3 cards, you wouldn't lose them. There was a cap, 5 fragments. Once you placed your 6th fragment, the leftmost one would fade away. So you could change who you would be in the game, but it happened slower. And then we eliminated the personal grids and we made the one central grid that we were all playing on and competing for with points.
I saw a note that talked about how there was an interaction, and I know you explained why there was an interaction in the first playtest. But when we played, I felt like the shared space that we were playing to necessitated interaction, and it might not have your direct haha beating up on Mark interaction. There is still competition for the same space, so players are forced to consider each other. I thought it was actually a very elegant solution to having player interaction with the minimal way that the turns play.
I just fell backwards into it there. We always want a game with interaction. I think that's one of the core tenements of whatever game we're going to create was we want some element of player interaction. Nobody wants to sit and just put a puzzle together by themselves. At least none of us. There's lots of people who do.
Off mic, you alluded to you got to have a long talk with Mike.
Yes.
Shout out. Congratulations on the showing at PAX East. But given his whirlwind, very deep experience now in game design, you got a chance to pick his brain about Dying World.
Yes. And before I talk about it, somebody asked me recently, they said, "Oh, how does it feel that Mike C's beating you to everything? He went to PAX with his game. He started after you." And I actually feel great about it because it's just another person who's close to us that we can absorb information from. And I think it's great. There's no competitive bone here at all. I love everything that he's doing, and I hope he does it first so that I can learn from it. So we've had these conversations and these talks, and we had one recently about Dying World. And I'm not going to say he's like pushing me in another direction. He's helping me find the direction I should be going. One of the things he said to me was, "I know you want to get away from the math. I know you don't like the math in the game. The relics have points. At the end of the game, you scored points based on, how they were connecting or touching other relics around them. So, you could get, I'm touching one yellow one, so I get a bonus here. So when you're tallying your game, it sounds like 1 + 1 plus another one over here. Oh, that's 2. Add that to, okay, my final score is, I don't like it.
You lost me.
Right? I don't like games where you can know the score if you're just like mentally keeping track of it and then make decisions based on that. Scrabble's a game where you always know the score, right? You're always counting it up and you're making decisions based on, so you're always trying to figure out, if I play this word, what's that going to allow my opponent to do? They're going to be able to get a double word off this vowel. I don't want them to be able to do that. I don't want to have to do that in a game. But I've been building games that have that. And Mike was just like, you don't want math. Why put math in it? And I started thinking about how we could play Dying World without math. And we started just talking about that and going through a different loop, a different way to play cards and a different way to score. Score's probably the wrong word. A different way to win the game or save the information you want to save. Because there's no winning. Your world is dying. So after our second playtest, we reset the board and Mike started putting all of the fragments just on the main board. He just started putting all the fragments, not the relics. The relics are the things that have the points on them, the matching sequence on it. And he just started putting the fragments on the board. And then we dealt a face down card to each other and said, who wins the game? And the idea there is that you could be playing this game with a secret objective that you win the game if, on your card, you're playing as like the memory specialist. Saving memory is really important to this character. And you win the game if you can have 6 fragments of memory on the probe, the thing in the middle. And if you do that, you win the game. And then Mike's card is something else. He wins the game if something else happens. Maybe if he can make a row of culture fragments. And in this way, you eliminate all of the numbers and you kind of bring it back to this idea that each person thinks, memory or culture is the thing that we need to preserve and we need to save. And you would do it maybe through rounds of drafting where you acquire the fragments and then you get to play them. So it was like a real simplification of the game that we were just playing. If we were simplifying from Animal Kingdom to Whimsy Val to Dying World, this is like another level of simplification.
I think that's a really beautiful imagining of the game. I wonder about... I never thought I would live in a world where you would pitch an abstract game.
Me either.
But I think there's something really beautiful about the way that you've described it. What I wonder is if you played this really abstract version of it, because you paint such a beautiful picture of the story that the game tells. And maybe this is a question to work on in playtesting or in the design process. There's a really long way between abstract game that you're describing the play of and the game that we're trying to construct a visualization for that has this aspect of dying planet, preserving this like rich information. And for me, I'm like, I can hold both. I can make that up for myself. But I do think as we think about designing the game, we would want to have something in the game that builds the story for players that won't see it the way that we're telling the story and will only see it as I compete to put my 4 green squares in the green squares in the corners of the board.
Yes.
Not to say that I don't love everything that you've described. I think abstract game is beautiful. I think the story that we're leaning towards in this game is beautiful. I think our design process will ask us, how do we reconcile the two pieces so we have elements of both?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I've been thinking about it too. Don't have the answer yet, but I know I want to find that balance between the two things. One of the things that Mike and I were talking about last night was, okay, so imagine you have these 3 characters playing the game, and one cares about culture, and one cares about knowledge, and one cares about memory. You're not sure which is which, and you're playing this game, and you realize at some point in the game that, oh, this person's the knowledge person. And if I play this card, or this token, or this hex on this space, the knowledge person's going to win the game. Don't really want to do that. But then what if there was this idea that if these players can't figure this out because your world is dying, and if this hex stays empty and we get to the end of the game, whether it's a round timer or whatever it is, you're out of cards, what if nobody wins? Because that's really what would happen. Like if you were really in a heated debate with somebody about the information that needed to be saved and you can't come to an agreement and you run out of time, then your thing doesn't get sent off and you don't get to preserve your civilization. So we thought that could be an interesting way to, a player's got a choice, am I just going to let this game end and nobody wins? Or am I just going to play this thing? I don't see it as king making, but what's important to you? And I think that comes down to, well, if you just care about abstract games, then that's important to you and nobody wins. But if you care about the theme, then you play this thing and, you got some of your stuff off, but you didn't win the game. Mark is crying, I think. He's got tears in his eyes right now.
I think the logical conclusion of the way you're describing that possibility, I never thought I would hear Jason describe creating a cooperative game.
It's still competitive. Don't do that to me.
But hear me out.
Go on.
I'm into this secret identities idea, and now you're getting You're getting Mark creative brain happening right now in front of you live. What if the character identities were assigned and themed in a way where different assignments of roles change the nature of the game? Where if you had like all three people need to meet their conditions, you have a version of the game where you get your roles, all of them are like game completion, meet your objective, and you have this you collaboratively build the board, but you don't have that information about what they are, who they are, for whatever reason. And so there's a win condition for completing the board. It's a cooperative game. What if you also had roles that you had like your nihilist, you had your saboteur, where now you have a competitive version where it's a race for the subset of players that are trying to send information versus the group of players that are trying to prevent. And now you can have a dynamic experience of, is it a collaborative game? Is it a competitive game? You could introduce your social dynamics. And I never thought I'd live in a world where Mark is pitching the social dynamics game. But I think the secret roles thing is really compelling in this dying world canon that we're creating.
Yeah, I mean, you hate the idea that there's saboteurs in this world, but they always exist, right?
It wouldn't even have to be a saboteur. You could have just a role be the nihilist, and they're like, none of this matters, and I'm just going to like flip pieces off the board until the world ends.
Love it. Now I want to play as that role. The game is now called Nihilist.
The other thing about the difference in the way that Mike described the game versus the way that we play tested it today is I do think you'd have it would necessitate a different turn sequence, because in the way that you and I just played, it was very much about constructing your components, whereas in the way that Mike C was laying out the game, it was about constructing the board. And so in the way that you would be competing to construct the board, if you had there's only one winner version of Dying World, you'd have to have mechanics that allow you to manipulate the board as opposed to manipulating your player area row where your fragments exist. And I think both could be very compelling.
Yeah, like you could play something on top of another one to replace it. But yes, you said it earlier that this theme pulls you much further into the game, the world building, the process than political animals.
So let's go. The world is dying, but the building is just beginning. Ooh, that's a good box.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, it's on the cell shader, the box.
The world is dying, but the building has just begun. Ah.
Yeah, better phrasing. You're the word guy.
Is this a word game?
No. You tried to make it a word game, though. You did. You tried very hard. Whimsy Val almost became a word game.
Would you say that we've traveled light years on this game?
Whew. Yeah, I do. When this season started, I had a very fixed mindset that I don't care what we do, but we're making Animal Kingdom. We're making a political game with animals. Doesn't matter what happens. If I'm so bad says this is terrible and I never want to play it, and Mark is like, meh, and nobody wants to help me, I was making Animal Kingdom. It had to happen because I said it was going to happen. And I think now, having kind of tried to work through that problem, that it is okay to say we can move in a different direction and still retain the knowledge and information that we've learned along the way. The things that we've done for the last 5 months are critical and really important to how we're building this game. And I say all of that, but I also know we're under the gun because we're going to the first exposure playtest hall. It's not going to be like KublaCon where we just we weren't able to make it. We paid for this. We're going to Gen Con. We're going to the first exposure playtest hall. I feel like we can get a version of this game on that table that is interesting to play. And I'm going to say this and just eat my words eventually, be relatively unique in some of the things that we're doing. But we're gonna find in our research later on that this game totally exists, and I don't know if Mark's Googling over there. We're gonna find this game totally exists, or you're just playing Azul, or you're just playing Splendor, which is how I moved away from Whimsy Val, where I just felt like I was designing something else.
I can tell you, this is not Azul.
Okay.
So you've got something going for you so far. I hate to say I told you so. I know we had a lot of back and forth about, can we pivot? Should we pivot? Are we going to pivot? And I probably didn't prevent the stance with enough conviction, but I'm glad you got to this point of it is okay to depart from where we've been. And I think if you look at the evolution of Animal Kingdom while we were working on it, you had an instinctual understanding of something radically has to change from the first version with hard and soft stances to the map version to the calendar to the rally debate. There was so much intense fluctuation, large magnitude changes to what Animal Kingdom could be, would be, should be, that I think you like physically or on some sense outside the tunnel vision of Animal Kingdom is the game and it's going to be politics and it's going to be animals. On some level, I think you had that understanding and you were trying to reconcile, how do I make it Animal Kingdom but do something radically different? And I think letting go of it having to be Animal Kingdom has brought us to an idea that is much more compelling, much more interesting, simpler, and something that is easier to collectively dig our teeth into. Now Jason's tearing up.
I just want to believe you. I just want to believe you. Sometimes I'm like, is that podcast Mark or is that Mark? And I do the same thing. You know, sometimes you're like, is that podcast Jason or is that Jason? Because sometimes is he trying to be funny just for the podcast or is that just Jason being funny?
We'll find out on Wednesday.
I want to see it with your actions.
I'm ready for the fun part.
Stop saying that.
The Misplay podcast is brought to you by Mike C., Missy, JP Savard, Parney, Kyle Flowers, Adjos, Brian, Binns, and Peter. Consider donating at patreon.com/themisplay. If you'd like to become a featured sponsor of the show, find our form at themisplay.com/sponsors.
That we can leech information from, that we can learn from. So there's nothing about it that's like...
Take out leech. I mean, it's funny, but take it out.